Welcome to the deep dive. Are you ready to explore a question that's stirred up debate for, well, probably as long as humans have been around?
A question that's definitely not for the faint of heart.
Yeah, today we're diving deep into this question. Is religion evil?
Weighty stuff.
To tackle this, we're turning to a pretty provocative source, an interview with Professor Richard Dawkins.
The famous evolutionary biologist and, let's be honest, not religion's biggest fan.
He's definitely known for his strong opinions. And in this interview, he really lays out his critique of religion, no holds barred.
So this deep dive is going to be less about easy answers and more about, prompting some serious critical thinking. What do we really believe and why?
Exactly.
Yeah.
So let's get right into it. Dawkins, he's a committed atheist, right? But he goes beyond just not believing.
He kind of takes it to the next level.
He does. He actually compares believing in God to, get this, believing in fairies or leprechauns.
Wow, okay, that's a bold comparison. But I see where he's going with this. He's emphasizing the need for evidence.
Right. Like, without solid proof, can you really justify belief in a higher power any more than you can, say, belief in unicorns?
It makes you think, that's for sure. It doesn't stop there. Dawkins then goes on to, he paints a pretty harsh picture of the God we see in the Old Testament.
Yeah, not exactly the warm and fuzzy image some people have. He uses some pretty strong words to describe this God.
Words like jealous, petty, even bloodthirsty. He's pointing out the darker aspects of those ancient texts.
Which definitely clashes with the idea of a loving and compassionate God, right?
It definitely raises questions, like can you reconcile those stories of violence and punishment with a truly benevolent deity? It's a challenge to traditional views, for sure.
And it gets even more, well, intense when Dawkins argues that blind faith, believing without any evidence, is actually one of the world's greatest evils.
He compares it to a virus, tougher to wipe out than smallpox. That's a pretty powerful image.
And he's clearly worried about the consequences of this kind of uncritical belief. He believes it can lead to fanaticism, even violence.
He's got some pretty stark examples to back that up. He points to suicide bombers, saying their actions are often fueled by promises of, a heavenly reward.
It's a chilling thought, that faith could drive people to such extreme acts.
It's definitely something to consider. But, we need to be careful here. Attributing violence solely to religion is, it's an oversimplification.
Right. History's full of examples of violence driven by all sorts of things. Nationalism, political ideologies, just plain hatred. It's complicated.
Exactly. And Dawkins' critics, they point out that he sometimes oversimplifies the connection between religion and violence.
They bring up examples like the Tamil Tigers.
Yeah.
This separatist group in Sri Lanka, their suicide bombings, they were all about nationalist goals, not religion.
And even 9/11, while often linked to Islamic extremism, the roots of that conflict are super complex. Political grievances, historical factors, it's a tangled web.
It's definitely not as simple as saying religion equals violence. But Dawkins does raise an important question. Could religion, even if it's not the only factor, create an environment where some people are more prone to justifying violence?
That's where things get really interesting, and we'll dive deeper into that right after this. So we're back, diving deeper into this whole religion and violence thing. And Dawkins, he doesn't shy away from controversy, does he?
No, he doesn't. And he actually brings up communism as, well, a counterpoint to this idea that atheism automatically equals a more peaceful world.
Right. It's like, think about the regimes under Stalin or Mao Zedong. Officially atheist, but responsible for some truly horrific acts.
Exactly. And Dawkins, he argues that these regimes weren't driven by atheism itself, but by this dogmatic belief in Marxism.
So it's not about the label, atheism or religion, but about any ideology becoming dangerous when it's, taken to the extreme.
And when it rejects critical thinking, right? When people stop questioning.
Absolutely. He even points to the Albanian Communist Constitution. It actually called for promoting atheistic propaganda.
Trying to force a scientific, materialist world outlook.
Yeah, which just goes to show that even atheism, when it becomes dogmatic, can be used to justify, oppression. But let's shift gears for a bit. One criticism of Dawkins is that he often overlooks the good that religious people and institutions do.
Yeah, he focuses a lot on the negatives, the critiques. But what about figures like Martin Luther King Jr. or Gandhi? Their commitment to nonviolence, it was deeply rooted in their faith.
Right. Can we say their actions weren't driven by their beliefs?
It seems like a more balanced perspective would acknowledge both the harms and the benefits of religion. I mean, religious organizations do a lot of good in the world. charity work, community building.
Providing a sense of purpose and meaning for a lot of people. And this actually brings us to another interesting point in the interview. Dawkins grapples with this question: can science actually provide answers to moral questions?
Like, can science tell us what's right and wrong? Or is morality more of a human construct?
Dawkins seems to lean toward morality being something we create, not something that's like scientifically determined.
Right. He argues that while science can inform our understanding of the world, it can't dictate our values.
It's a key distinction. Science helps us understand the physical world, but questions of ethics, values, meaning, we need to look beyond just empirical evidence for that.
Dawkins even admits that science can't answer every question. He brings up the concept of the multiverse, the idea that our universe is just one of many, each with its own laws of physics.
Which is interesting because the multiverse is, well, it's a theory, but we can't directly observe or prove it.
So why would Dawkins, who's so critical of religious belief for its lack of evidence, be open to the possibility of a multiverse?
Some of his critics point to that as like an inconsistency. Is he applying different standards for science versus religion?
Dawkins argues that while the multiverse is speculative, it's still grounded in scientific principles, in mathematical models.
He sees it as a plausible explanation for some of the things we observe in our universe, even though we can't definitively prove it yet.
So he's saying that even when science ventures into the unknown, it still operates within a framework of logic and reason. It's always trying to find explanations that fit with our understanding of the natural world.
But it does raise a bigger question. Even if science can't answer everything, can it offer us a sense of meaning and purpose in life?
That's what we'll explore in the final part of our deep dive. All right, we're back and ready to wrap up our deep dive into the world of Richard Dawkins and his, let's say, unique perspective on religion. Before the break, we were talking about the limits of science. Like, even science can't answer everything, right?
Right, and that leads to a pretty big question. If science doesn't have all the answers, especially when it comes to things like meaning and purpose, well, does that open up a space for religion? Even Dawkins, as critical as he is, seems to recognize that humans have this deep need for something more than just the material world.
Yeah, when I was reading the interview, there was this one part that really stood out to me. Dawkins was talking about how we're kind of hardwired to look for patterns, to find meaning, even when it might not actually be there. It's like we're constantly searching for explanations, even if those explanations involve, the supernatural or the divine.
It's true, and from an evolutionary perspective, it makes sense. I mean, thinking a rustle in the bushes is a predator, even if it's just the wind, that could save your life, right? But the question is, in today's world, with all the information and scientific knowledge we have, does that instinct to jump to supernatural explanations, is it still helpful, or is it holding us back?
That's the big question, isn't it?
Mm-hmm.
Dawkins seems to be arguing that while religion might have been a source of comfort and meaning in the past, now it might be more of a hindrance, especially when it clashes with scientific evidence or, fuels intolerance and conflict.
He makes this interesting comparison between the decline of ancient religions, like the Greek gods or the Norse gods, and what could potentially happen to the major religions we see today. It's like, just as nobody worships Zeus or Thor anymore, maybe future generations will look back at our religions and see them as, I don't know, relics of a less enlightened time.
It's definitely a thought-provoking idea. But even if we agree with some of Dawkins' critiques of religion, can we really imagine a world without any belief systems at all? Would we just replace one set of beliefs with another? Maybe something even worse. Or can we find meaning and purpose without relying on the supernatural?
That's a question each of us has to grapple with, I think. Dawkins seems to find meaning in the pursuit of knowledge, in understanding the natural world through science. He sees the beauty and wonder in life itself without needing a supernatural creator to explain it.
And for some people, that scientific worldview is enough. But for others, they still need the comfort and community that religion offers, that sense of belonging and purpose that comes with belief in a higher power or a divine plan. Is there room for both? Can those two perspectives coexist?
Finding that balance, that's the key. Whether you're religious or secular, I think the goal is to be a critical thinker, aware of your own biases, and open to different points of view. I mean, the real takeaway from Dawkins isn't necessarily about agreeing or disagreeing with him. It's about using his ideas as a way to reflect on your own beliefs and how you see the world.
This deep dive has definitely given us a lot to think about. From the nature of faith and evidence to the complex relationship between religion and violence, Dawkins really pushes us to question our assumptions and have these important conversations.
Absolutely. And it reminds us that the search for truth, for meaning, for purpose, it's a journey, a lifelong process of learning and evolving and being open to new ideas.
Well, we hope you enjoyed this thought-provoking deep dive into the world of Richard Dawkins. If you did, don't forget to like and subscribe for more fascinating discussions like this one. Until next time, keep those questions coming and keep diving deep.